So this is an inflammatory response, and some people are actually dealing with inflammation that leads to pain. Well, pain, as you probably speak to with your audience, is pain can be non-inflammatory as well, in the role of the nervous system that is playing that and how we perceive pain. And so really it was my curiosity of how do I find the common denominator that all these people are dealing with inflammatory sources, and then how I can help people get to the root cause, remove the offending factor, and build on those foundational habits for good health to remove that inflammatory source.
Right. So I love it. So, I think some people get really interested in, oh, this causes this, or inflammation causes this, or I'm feeling this way because of this. But if you can't actually, it's interesting information, and some people talk about it, but if you don't actually take it the next step to figure out what actually is the root cause behind it and actual strategies to implement that you can address it, it's all worthless. Because I think that what I've noticed, you can speak to this too, but in the social media age, there's a lot of sexy topics that are very interesting to talk about, and it's easy to talk about sometimes, but hard to create results driven impacts on people. That's the hard part. It takes systems and trial and error and identifying and all this root cause work. And without all of that, the sexy topic is just a sexy topic, and that's about all.
Yeah, and it can get overwhelming for people, and people shut down. They don't actually make any meaningful change. And I think what I'm usually asking of people is lifestyle changes. We are sold this day and age that our solutions can be sold to us in a pill or some type of supplement or something that we can just take orally. And while there are demonstrated benefits to nutraceuticals for inflammation and pain management, as well as pharmaceuticals, thank goodness we have them. If we never take personal responsibility for our health and start to play a proactive role in our healing, there's only so far that we can get in that journey of really trying to understand what's going on with our body. And I often say one of the biggest fallacies we've been led to believe from such a young age is that we can't trust our body. We start to mute and dial down this intuition that we're all born with. And one of the greatest discoveries and investments you can make in your health is to be really curious about symptoms and the way that your body is communicating with you, because all symptoms are messengers, including pain.
Right. It's so true. It's your nervous system is just it's trying to teach, it's waving a flag. It's trying to identify for you, hey, there's a problem here. And sometimes the signals themselves are kind of what drive you crazy or like actually put you in pain because the nervous system is doing that, but there is a reason behind it. So if we're going to talk about, pain itself and we're going to talk about inflammation, I'll just kind of go into just what I see with the nervous system sometimes. The body sends signals up to the nervous system, to the brain, and the brain interprets those signals and decides, what are we going to do with it? Like, should we make pain? Should we make you feel pain? Should we make you feel tight? Should we make you feel relaxed? Should we make you feel happy? It interprets the signals, and based on past experiences, it's going to make us feel or our body to function in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to physical pain, sometimes when the body has been in dysfunction for so long, the nervous system now becomes hyper vigilant, and things that didn't create pain, or things that created pain, but it took a lot of that thing or a lot of force behind that thing. Now it just takes less force because the body is in this hyper vigilant state.
Right.
And what happens is, as that state continues, your body, you start transitioning now into almost a sympathetic, which is a fight or flight mode, right? Because now your body's like, okay, something must be horribly wrong. Like, I've been in pain for a while. My systems are firing, starts putting you in that fight or flight. And that's when you start releasing hormones and cortisols and adrenalines. And these can sensitize nerve endings to make you feel things more intensely, or it can tense up muscles. And when you tense up muscles, in the short term, it's a good way to have higher function of those muscles. But in the long term, if they're always in a tense state, you're not able to oxygenate them as well. And you
Mm-hmm.
start they become dysfunctional and they become achy. And it's kind of like you're working out all the time. And so it manifests as physical pain. And then now you actually have a physical thing going on. So it sends signals up to the brain, and the brain's like, aha, I knew there was something wrong down there. And it just creates this loop over and over again. So it can create physical, actual, real inflammation. And is that something that you see? And I guess a question would be, if you're seeing someone who's in a state where you would think there is inflammation, that is a contributing factor to this.
Mhm.
Is food the first, like, what's the starting point for how we're gonna address what's causing that inflammation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And food is a foundational piece, but I actually take it a step further. Usually, where I've been starting with, so the cases that I've been working with recently are people with dysautonomia, mast cell activation syndrome,
Mm,
dealing with mold toxicity, multiple chemical sensitivity. Maybe there's Lyme. There's this full spectrum of chronic infection, high allostatic load. And so, for a lot of people, when I see them or talk to them, they have a very limited diet. There's only so many safe foods. They're reacting to all these seemingly healthy foods, and they
mhm,
have to basically refine their diet. And a lot of times this is coming from immune dysregulation, but a lot of this is orchestrated by our nervous system. And to your point too, you're talking about the nervous system, where I even focus and kind of take a step back is some of these people that are in chronic kind of, fight or flight survival shutdown mode, their body, they're in a cell danger response. And for anyone that doesn't know what a cell danger response is, we have these organelles in our cells called mitochondria, and they produce energy and responsible for growth and repair. And they also have tiny security systems. And when they sense threat, whether that's from toxins, stress, or injury, like they shift out of that repair mode and into protection mode. And so when they do that, they shut down normal function, they increase inflammation as a defense signal.
mm.
And because of that, that's when people will start to deal with lots of food sensitivities and not having a wide tolerance to different foods. They might have brain fog, chronic fatigue, pain or inflammation, digestive issues. So of course, I am going to start with food with them because they're reacting to foods, but it's not actually the
Yeah,
food that is the problem. It's the
right.
terrain, it's the environment, it's the nervous system that is in this protection mode. And that's going to impact your digestion. So you're not even able to break down food. So yes, with people that are really sick, usually I am removing foods for the first couple weeks to kind of help support their body reduce that inflammatory load and
Oh, so it would be
where they're at.
the foods that you've either identified as triggers to them or just the most commonly triggering foods?
Yeah, I
So
don't I don't do food sensitivity testing. Some
yeah,
people bring it to me, and there's a bunch of different things out there in terms of how people are testing their reactivity to certain foods. Gold standard when it comes to trying to identify how foods are affecting you personally and inflammation is going to be an elimination diet. So there's common antigenic foods that people most commonly react to.
'cause I was gonna say I've heard that there's, kind of it's up for debate, some of the food sensitivity tests, and, like,
Totally. Yep.
there can be, like, contradicting results, like, if you take the same test 3 times.
Right. And so if somebody comes back and they have a panel where there's 30 plus foods that are flagged as moderate to high in terms of things that they're reacting to, you might think, oh, I need to cut out all these foods, and this is what's driving my inflammation. Oftentimes, what I see when people have many markers from fruits, vegetables, nuts, proteins that are reacting high, it's actually a sign of deeper gut issues and that there's hyperpermeability to the gut. And so your gut lining is this thing that like brick and mortar, right? We have this single layer of lines that lines our digestive tract, and that mortar keeps it nice and sealed off. So undigested food, proteins, bacteria stuff is not seeping through.
Mm,
But in the presence of a nervous system that is dysregulated and is out of and is shifted into the survival based state, it's in protection mode,
mm,
the gut can get more permeable. And so that mortar starts to dissolve. And now there's a gateway, an entry point
mm.
for the different foods that they're consuming to then seep through the digestive wall and react with the underlying immune system. So some of you may have heard like there's 70+% of your immune system resides in the gut. What they're referring to is this lymphoid tissue that is right under the side of that wall, that brick layer. So
Mm,
of course, when you're eating otherwise healthy foods, avocado, chicken, spinach, tomato, and
yep,
all of a sudden it's reacting with the immune system. The immune system is responding more to like, this shouldn't be here. And so we need to respond appropriately with inflammation, because inflammation is kind of like the fire alarm, the flare signal to say, hey, we need to do something about this. I think that's something that a lot of people maybe get wrong with inflammation. Like, I think most people understand, I've heard of inflammation. They realize inflammation is probably bad. You want less inflammation as opposed to more. But
right,
inflammation actually is a Goldilocks thing. Like we need, and there are
yeah,
healthy amounts of inflammation because inflammation is a repair process.
Right.
The issue is when it's chronic and it doesn't turn off. And this is where, working on those foundational pieces to address that so that we can increase capacity for food, for stress, for detoxification, and even capacity for pain and,
Right.
and inflammation, because it's all part of this whole cascade.
Yeah, I remember when I was going to school, that was one of the first questions that I had when we had units on inflammation, especially in sports injuries and musculoskeletal. It's like ice, 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 ice. And then I remember one day thinking, like, "Oh, wait a second, oh my God, inflammation is a repair process to remove debris and allow for healing. Why are we shutting that down with ice? Why are we not?" And then there are reasons for secondary injury to get people to perform more quickly, immediately. Like you kind of have to weigh the options. Like long term, we might not get as much healing, but like we're going to get someone back on the field. There's a lot to it. But shutting down all inflammation is a repair process, which is almost the funniest thing of all when we like demonize it. But I guess it's just like anything else. It's when you becomes a chronic non-functional state of something that it becomes an issue.
Yeah, I saw somebody just ask in the comments, like, how do you measure inflammation? So there are blood serum tests that you can run that can give you an idea of how much inflammation is present, but it doesn't tell you where it's coming from. So C-reactive protein is a protein made in your liver. You can get that run by your doctor. They also have a more high sensitivity one. I also like to look, ESR, which is a sedimentation rate you can get with most of your typical blood work, CBC. But then I also like to look at ferritin, because ferritin, while it is a storage form of iron, can also be elevated as an acute phase reactant. So during acute inflammation, that will actually be elevated and higher. Vitamin D is an important one too, because vitamin D plays a role in immune modulation. And so if someone's vitamin D is suboptimal, this time of year too, seeing people with vitamin D is of like a 7 or an 11 or a 20. I love to see that closer to 50. So 50 to 70 kind of being that range. And so as we're getting less UV light in the Northern Hemisphere, if we're not supplementing with vitamin D, with K2, usually I like to add those together, that could also be something to look into if you've done recent blood work.
It's interesting when going back to when you were discussing, inflammation or different food sensitivities and how if your nervous system is in a state of essentially fight or flight or dysregulation, then you're not going to be able to actually break down or utilize the foods in a normal capacity. And so then you can have some type of reaction to that. It does remind me of I know that there's the food industry is a whole can of worms you could open up, but we do always, one of the ways that, and there's good and bad with it, but one of the ways that we demonize like the US food system is that when I go on vacation, I feel great, like their food's made better. And it just leads to the natural question of, does it feel better? Or is it just because your body is in a more of a healed state where now it's like, how come I can eat this food there? Well, if your nervous system is in a totally different state, it's also going to be more functional in a capacity to utilize foods that maybe when you're in fight or flight here with your family and work, your body just doesn't absorb it in the same way.
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head, and I totally agree with you. Yes, acknowledging that the quality of food in places of like Europe are often of a higher quality, not using the same amount of pesticides, even though they still do use herbicides and pesticides out there. I think the biggest piece to what you just spoke to is actually your nervous system and actually being less stressed. Like that's probably actually the bigger driving factor than actually the food quality. And when your nervous system is regulated, you can tolerate more foods, even the foods that you're like, used to like just knock you out because you'd have brain fog and you'd feel tired and you'd have digestive issues. Like, I think that's the thing. We look at food as the problem, but really food is just a bystander responding to our internal state, and our nervous system is running the show and all of that.
Right. It's wild. What, if people are dysfunctional they're in a dysfunctional nervous system state, there's a lot of different things that can make you feel a certain way. So it could be a nervous system. It could be a short-term piece of things. It could be maybe an actual musculoskeletal problem. What are the symptoms that people experience most when you start being able to pinpoint more like this seems more of a nervous system issue? Like what are these presentations that most people you're seeing, like what are they experiencing that they're confused about because their normal medical test didn't pick up anything and they're fine?
Yeah, I would say the most common symptoms that I'm seeing, it's people with chronic sleep issues. So a lot of these being more chronic than they are acute. So sleep, one of those things. Digestive issues is a huge one. So my whole specialty, specialize in integrative gastroenterology, so all things gut, and of course study the gut microbiome, look at digestive markers, all these things like that, inflammation in the gut. But then the day, like your your gut is a huge processing center of emotions. And we have the enteric nervous system, which is a large nervous system within our gut that is responsible for many of its functions. And then we also have the vagus nerve, which is the longest cranial nerve that really is that highway that bridges the body to the brain. And so, a lot of these being more psychosomatic related, anxiety, mental health things, so anxiety and depression, brain fog, lethargy, having low motivation, hormone imbalances is very trendy, and like that's a catch-all, but like that can be another sign of somebody's nervous system that is dysregulated, kind of more in this fight or flight, overwhelmed, freeze response. Everyone has different presentations of this, but I always ask with my clients, like I go through the timeline, and that's very much functional medicine, and it's like, when did this happen? What happened around that time? But then if there's time, going even back to childhood, are there certain patterns that we see? Did you have a childhood? Like, are there spaces where, something happened to you, but you didn't have the tools and the capacity to process that fully? So we hold on to it. And that emotional charge gets stored in the fascia and the tissues and can ultimately be a somatic representation of something that we're holding that we haven't allowed ourselves to feel. And this is more of that more metaphysical perspective of things. But, pain is expressed in so many different ways, and tension and even patterning, trigger points, stuff like that. Like our body tells a story. And so for each person, it's really understanding where they're at, what their baseline knowledge is. There's some people that are like, I've been doing, vagal toning and breath work and cold plunge, and I meditate and I listen to binaural beats and I drink, ashwagandha. And it's like they're doing all these great things. And for one person, that may be a great tool to help set them on their way. But also in those individuals that are often doing all these things, these are the individuals that usually need to do less. Still trying to do all these things is actually the opposite of what their body's asking, which is to slow down, to actually be with their body, to be curious with the things that are coming up, not looking for the next thing to try to control and dial down the volume.
I think that's very well said. I mean, there's so much out there now, and people get overwhelmed with trying to implement everything to their routine. And I find that when you just stick with one thing, you start with one thing, it needs to be an informed decision so you're in the ballpark, but you start with one thing and you see it through and you see how your body responds to that one thing, and you can tweak it and change it, and you're just in data collection mode. You're not outputting a million different efforts. You're just one effort and you're just collecting data. And it's like, what's making me better? What's making me worse? What's not changing? My current effort, how can I tweak it? And then once I finish that effort or that little sprint within this effort, now what's the next decision to add on? So your decisions are constantly like, take the same thing and change variables to see how you can make it work. And once you've locked that, add a different piece to it. And this is all within that same approach. So you can learn so much with it. And then you can shift to the next thing. And I think people don't extend the time horizon long enough. It takes a certain amount of failure for you to kind of surrender and be like, all right, I'll take my time with it. And then it also takes a certain amount of failure to go from, I go somewhere and I just close my mind off and they fix me and then I leave, which is a short-term approach generally. It takes enough failures in those to get to the point where it's like, all right, I guess I need to kind of like whoever I'm working with, listen to them and learn and understand the processes and take accountability for my own health. And because whenever I see people who succeed instantly, they're just like eliminating pain. They keep it behind them. It's the people who said, I got time. So like, sure, you want me to this level? Like some people in the way that I work with people, I have them go through levels. So some people finish a level in a week. And maybe that's because their body was ready for that, or maybe it's because they rushed it. And I have some people say like, I'm going to take 3 weeks with every level. And those people also are wanting to learn. That's why they're doing it. And every single time it's those people who succeed on the higher level. So it's like, you have to just extend that time horizon. So like, listen, you've been here a while. What's the rush? Like, just do it the right way. Because what happens is you end up wasting more time going back to the beginning because you're so confused. If things are worsening and you have too many things that you're doing, you have no idea what's making it worse. If they're improving, you might think, oh, this is great. But then when the next flare up hits, which is inevitable, you have no idea the path you took to get there.
Right. What I'm hearing is the importance of narrowing down variables that could be contributing to the pain as you're trying to identify that. And then with that knowledge, you're able to titrate, you're able to play more of a role from a place of empowerment in your own healing and pain management, as opposed to how it's constantly outsourced typically to others.
Yeah, and to your initial point, everything that I just said, the latter way, which is doing too many, that's where that effort overwhelm, like it's forget the data collection is messed up. It's just like the emotional energy to actually pursue that is just like, it's insane. You can't do it right. It's just like regular life. You do too many things, like you just can't focus on them properly. And I've definitely fallen into that trap many times, but
Yeah.
you have to learn from it.
And one thing that you said I just wanted to echo, and I think what can be hard and challenging, because it is a big shift, is going from this passive role of going to see the doctor. This is what's wrong with me. This is what you take, which is usually it's a pill of some sort. It's something that is simple. Yeah. It's not a very layered plan where there's a lot of like asking the individual to play a proactive role. That's a big shift. Asking for a lifestyle thing. Right. I'm sure in your practice as a PT, you're really empowering your patients. Here's exercises, corrective things. These are how these are contributing to these set of expressions and symptoms. But it's like you're playing a role in this and you have to be curious, and it can be a lot to take on. Like, we all live very busy lives, but there's the greatest gift you can give yourself, for those that are listening, is to invest in your health, to be curious, to lean on others, to get help. And take the time to learn more about your body where you can. And we have so much information online now, which is incredible. But I also understand too, I think the paralysis by analysis and how there's so much out there can lead to where people feel overwhelmed and shut down.
And if you've, is there a simple step that you've noticed is like a strong first step for if you are in an inflamed state to kind of shut that down without taking some type of anti-inflammatory pill? Is it going to step one of an elimination diet, or like how does that, like, what's the short-term fix that could go right into a long-term?
Yeah. So let's break that down. Well, before food, one of the things I always do with people is put them through a body scan. So I talk to them how to do a body scan, bringing awareness into their body, noticing the pain, the sensation, is there emotion connected to it, breathing into it. It's kind of a somatic awareness exercise to be more curious with the pain, because if we're still approaching it with, nutrition and trying to change our diet in order to reduce the pain, it sounds kind of, insidious, but like, can you lean into the pain and ask in more of this?
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
So body scan, but then food is a big lever and is going to work really fast and can work really well. So for someone that is in pain, I guess there's two parts. There's people that are maybe standard American diet. They're eating, 60, 70% of their diet from ultra processed foods, probably not eating a lot of vegetables, fiber, stuff like that. So with these individuals, it could be as start to prioritize color. So polyphenols and antioxidants and brightly colored fruits, vegetables, herbs, spices. Load up on the omega-3 fats from cold water, oily fish like sardines, herring, mackerel, trout, and remove fried foods. That's kind of the first place, easiest tier. Someone's like, I got that. I've been doing that. I need more support. That's when I'll start to bring in an elimination diet. So an elimination diet, I mentioned, is gold standard, and it can help with a whole host of different things, not just pain. It was actually my own journey where I did an elimination diet back in college, that after removing these food groups, so it's gluten, dairy, corn, soy, peanuts, chocolate, alcohol, eggs, if I didn't say eggs. Am I missing any? Citrus sometimes, nightshades sometimes, but those are kind of like extra credit if people need more. So it's really those core 8. So gluten, dairy, corn, soy, sugar, refined sugar, that's one, chocolate and peanuts. So you remove it for 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes a little bit longer. You create a diet diary. Most people will notice improvements in less joint pain, needing less of their non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, feeling better within 24 to 48 hours. Like, it actually can change really quick. Yeah. For some people, that's not enough, and there's something else that their body is reacting to. So for these individuals, I will take it a step further. When it comes to more musculoskeletal chronic pain, arthritic pain, I find that nightshades, the alkaloids in nightshade vegetables, are often aggravating to people with things like arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis, fibromyalgia, those type of things.
Mm-hmm.
So that also includes foods such as eggplant, tomato, potatoes, ashwagandha, which a lot of people miss because it's a supplement, goji berries, and all your peppers, bell
So all the
pepper,
stuff I love.
all the stuff you love. Some people, though, they might not notice anything or just 20% improvement of elimination diet over the first week. They cut out the nightshades, it drops at like 50%. So that's kind of like where I would start with people if they're looking at really trying to understand what's driving it. And it's not, the goal isn't to be on this for the rest of your life. This is, as you mentioned, you're starting to remove common foods. You feel better. You're going to then keep inventory in a diet journal. And when you introduce these after 1 to 2 months, you're only going to introduce one food at a time, and you're going to only do one food introduction every 3 days. So if you cut out 8, it's going to be introducing those 8 foods over 24 days. And the idea is to start to pinpoint, when I have eggs, my joints flare up and I'm in a lot of pain and it's burning and it's hot, but I'm good when I eat corn. So that seems to be fine. I don't have any symptoms. So it's a way for you to personalize it for you. I have another subset of groups, which I can talk about, but I wanted to know first if there's any questions you had related to that before I go into more of the advanced individuals.
No. I thought that was well laid out. I mean, it seemed like a plan that makes sense. You're starting out not trying to take them on a too intensive a path where you're just saying just make sure these are in your diet, and then you just take them each step along the way. I mean, that's
Right.
the same exact way that I work.
That's the same way too. So yeah, you're eliminating, first add and then eliminate. But whole foods is definitely where you're going to want to start to prioritize. Now, the people that I have been working with more recently are those with like the mast cell activation syndrome. They have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, so they have chronic gut issues. They might have Lyme. They might be dealing with mold toxicity or dealing with chronic inflammatory response syndrome. They have 15 different medications, all these things like that. So with these individuals, highly sensitive, lots of food sensitivities. And not only are they having sensitivities, which is immune mediated. So when they eat these foods, the immune system orchestrates inflammation in response to that food.
Mm-hmm.
There's 2 other factors. People with histamine issues, they're going to, whenever they eat certain things like aged cheeses, smoked fish in a can, avocado, fermented foods, that could be yogurts, kimchi, sauerkraut, things like spinach, they can develop histamine responses. And for these individuals, one of the ways you can drop histamine quickly is to do a low histamine-based diet. If you're not familiar with that, you can look into what that is online. It's very restrictive. And oftentimes they're also taking out the other inflammatory foods on top of that. So it makes things challenging. Some people have the histamine, they have more of the chronic inflammation picture, but then they also have gut issues. And so I see that too, where it's histamine, gut, inflammation. So not only is it low histamine, it's low FODMAP, which is a low fermentable diet where you're not eating a lot of prebiotic fiber-rich vegetables, garlic, onions, jicama, banana, apple, that stuff like that. And then you have removal of a lot of these other food groups. So it ends up being really restrictive. What this ends up being for these specific individual is more of a carnivore adjacent diet. And while there's no literature specifically studying this diet for these conditions, I have found that it drops inflammation absolutely rapidly for people, gets them out of acute pain. You can cut it as much as 50% within 24 hours for some people. And really what you're doing is you're basically removing all foods that somebody could react to bring inflammation down. Now, it's restrictive. It's a big ask, but the goal again is to start to understand how's the body responding to this. Do you actually respond to this? If somebody doesn't respond from a carnivore adjacent diet from me that is super, super low, like antigenic foods and low inflammation, but they still have a lot of pain, that's where I start to get curious. What role is the nervous system and the stories it's holding and the stress response playing in all of this? Right? That's a big piece too when people are not improving on that. But a lot of people will feel better if they get to that point if they're really desperate, doing like a 7-day reset on a carnivore adjacent diet. And what do I mean by that? You're basically eating meat. If you do eat fish, it has to be fresh fish. It can't be It can't be frozen, and it can't, no leftovers, because those are high histamine. But basically a lot of bison. You can do buffalo, you can do beef. You're not doing dairy, you're not doing eggs. Of the vegetables that you're doing, you might do cucumber, you might do arugula, you might do papaya, certain fruits, but it's really kind of like a meat and very select fruit diet. That can help people, but again, we need to then, while we're using that to improve quality of life, drop the inflammation, get curious as to how do they get up in this state? And always a part of that conversation that needs to happen is addressing their nervous system.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. The carnivore diet, a lot of people report that they feel good on it. Like simply put, I feel good on a carnivore diet. And you know, diet and nutrition is such a complicated area. Like there's so much, you know, I think that when it's purpose specific, it's a lot easier for people to agree. And when it's just like, what's the healthiest diet? I mean, that conversation could go around in circles. And I bring that up because I know that the carnivore diet, people really do seem to have, as you stated, almost like higher energy. I mean, it comes down to ketosis and maybe, and with what you're doing, there's other factors involved, but you know, you're in this state of like consistent energy, less reactive, feeling clear, feeling better. It's just so fascinating to me.
Yeah, I look at it as a tool. And,
Yeah.
I'm very open-minded to everything, as long as it's not going to cause harm. I don't look, you know, I look at the carnivore diet as a tool. It can be a
I like
therapeutic tool.
yeah, I think that's a
But it's not a
great.
forever. Some people are doing it as a lifestyle, but when you look at the overwhelming majority of the research that we have, the data on what is the healthiest diets, it includes fresh fruits and vegetables and fiber,
Right.
and it's more of a Mediterranean approach, and higher in monounsaturated fats, lower in saturated fats,
Yeah.
and eating seasonally, and polyphenols and all those kind of things like that.
Yeah, and when you look at some of the, you know, areas with the blue zones, you know, people are eating primarily carbohydrates in those areas, and somehow, like in our Western diet, we associate, you know, very low body fat, a pumping six pack, and protein good, carbs bad. That's like our version of healthy. But then when you actually look at the places where people live the longest, it's multifactorial, it's
Yeah.
social, it's stress. They have totally opposite diets. I was talking to my grandmother who's 95, and she grew up in Italy, and she was like, "Oh, meat for us, that was like a novelty because we just didn't have the money to get it to have meat all the time. Like we were eating carbs and vegetables and fruits constantly, and they also ate a lot less." She's like, "Oh, she's like, as soon as I came to the US, she's like, your grandfather really liked to start cooking chicken and grilling, and we were eating higher consumption, so it was more food, so the diet changed a lot." So it is like this is a different conversation that we're talking about, which we're talking about pain and function and using tools. But just when you look at like Eastern versus Western's idea of health, what it means to look or be healthy, it's interesting how different, how much it's evolved in the US. And now that's everywhere. Like I remember like 20 years ago, I remember in college, I went on vacation to Italy, right? And so no one, doesn't want to sound bad, but like no one was jacked. No one had big muscles. Everyone, and now you go now and like everyone's working out, everyone's lifting, everyone's pumped up. So it's like everything is spreading out everywhere now.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like US sets the stage with everything and everyone follows, but um, you know, no, no other country or culture really follows a carnivore diet. It's very much um, a Western movement. And I know there's people that are proponents of carnivore diet. That's like, yes, the Inuit in Greenland and the Maasai and in Kenya. And I actually went out to Kenya and I stayed with the Maasai and I did a whole bush experience and,
Oh
you know,
wow.
ate goats and drank the goat milk. And they actually though serve polenta. So they are served
Oh
like
really?
corn now. They have,
Yeah,
yep, they have
I love
more
polenta.
carbohydrates in their diet now. They had even spinach, but they do use nose to tail the entire animal, whether it's the sheep, the goat, or the cow.
Mhm.
But and they drink the blood too. That was definitely an experience for me, like fresh out the throat type thing.
Wow.
Um, but Yeah, I think in the past that's what they did because they were a community that migrated and it was really their livestock that they had with
It's what
them
they
that they
had.
could rely
Yeah.
on. But I'd asked them like the last 20 years, like a lot more of them are eating more starchy carbohydrates with the meat and milk.
So I think a good area to kind of bring the conversation to an end, something that I have been thinking about a lot as well. When it comes to the nervous system, there's a lot of talk about, you know, one of the facets of it is trauma, right? And so childhood trauma, new trauma, old trauma, something beneath the surface subconsciously that maybe a lot of people can't put their finger on what it is, and it's just manifesting symptoms. And then on the other side, there is a health anxiety that derives from something that came up in their life that isn't going away. And so they may say, like the trauma person may say, oh, there was always funny signs. There's always stuff going on. I never felt, I always had difficulty sleeping. Like I always had my body was always sore. This other person would say, like, for 35 years, everything was perfect. And then like I started getting this pain and this discomfort started, and then it didn't go away. And I started getting worried. I went to 50 doctors and I did it. And there's that side too, because that's the side that I end up seeing. Like 70% of my people are in that side where when I talk to them about this, like, oh no, I was like, trust me, this is new. I remember when it started, and now my nervous system is wrecked. Um, and so I think it's two very different things. And there's different approaches. Like you're going to manage someone who's trying to work through trauma and longstanding emotionally based dysfunction very differently. And than someone where the nervous system is hyperactive. It's trying to protect you. It's trying to protect you from movement. It doesn't trust movement. It's emotionally charged and confused because of what's going on. You're focusing on it all the time because it's new. Um, and so because that's something in my practice, I try to put people in buckets. And if I know this person's in this bucket, like we need to do more deep diving, whereas this person, we need to teach more about the nervous system and build trust and movement in the body. I don't know if you have that experience, if you could shed any light on that as well.
Yeah, like I'm always assessing where somebody's at, what level of vitality, and I can get a gauge from that by like how robust is their diet, how often are they working out, can they do sauna, can they do cold plunge, can they do some of these hormetic stressors, or does it really tank them? I am not an expert in the nervous system. I've learned a lot about the nervous system over the last couple of years. I'm really interested in it because I do realize it is a huge root cause factor to a lot of chronic health ailments, but it is very buzzy right now, nervous system dysregulation. But at the end of the day, what is it? It's creating safety in the body is really, I think, what it comes down to. And you might feel safe in your body. So you're like, what are you talking about? But when your body is constantly perceiving threat, it's scanning for threat, which it's like this environment is not safe. And so it's kind of subtle and pervasive in that way, whether it again is to something traumatic that happened to you, to stress, to a recent infection. Look at things like long COVID. So people have this viral, picture like after the fact where these individuals, their brain constantly is kind of on alert and tagging everything as threat. And so if they don't do some level of brain retraining and limbic retraining, their body's constantly going to be in this loop where it's kind of chronically kind of flagging everything as threat. And so I often recommend people to try Primal Trust. I think I saw that you're familiar with them, Dr. Joe, but they are really bringing more awareness into the body, the somatics of it as well as some of the deeper work for those that want to, and also the brain retraining, limbic retraining piece. And so it's all about coming back to the body, being in the body, feeling in your body, sensation. And I think, that's kind of, I think this where things are going is it's this reclamation of self. It's reconnecting to self, and the nervous system is that bridge that really allows us to have that interoception of what is going on in our body.
I think it's very well put, and I think an example about the strength of the nervous system, especially with physical pain, is that, coming from a world, the world of physical therapy and working and having friends who are chiropractors, there's so many different techniques to address the same thing. It's like if you want to release a certain muscle or a portion of the upper neck, there's this technique, that technique, this technique, that technique. And most of the time, they work similarly. Like there's some standout ones for sure, but they work similarly. So how could, if you touch someone and do this versus touch someone and do this and this, is always work the same? And what I think I've come to realize is that you've created a new input in the nervous system. Like your nervous system is in a loop and it's sending the same thing, and you've done something differently. Your nervous system's like, wow, that was different. And because what other reason would you have to explain all these different variations that create a very similar effect? Like there's something about just resetting a signal to a nervous system. There's many ways to do it. But once you input something new and the system has that to focus on, things change.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just very, and the more you work with people, the more you realize it's just about changing the inputs. And then but
Mm-hmm.
those can come in the form of short term or long term. And I think that's where the real key comes in to people who are able to fix people versus not.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. You said that there's many different inputs. What are some of the inputs that you're using when, if you see someone that's in a dysfunctional state and you're trying to support their body's own healing mechanisms through nervous system? What are those things?
So if it's body versus mind. So basically with the body, what we usually try to do, so what I work with is, jaw pain, headaches, dizziness, neck and shoulder pain, and then brain fog is really coming into that. We usually go to the site of pain. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that is the root cause of the pain, but first we want to identify what the pain generator is. What is the actual structure, the actual region that something's happening, it's making you feel pain. Now, there could be something down the chain that's moving you in a certain direction that's making that structure be the pain generator. So if we just go to the pain generator and we start addressing the joints or the muscles. So one of the simplest ways is to just go just through simple input and have people explore the pain. And I think you alluded to that in something you were saying earlier about navigating the pain. But wherever the pain is, just putting your finger on it and doing a sustained pressure where you start examining the pain. What is this pain? You start moving the area. How does this react? How does it feel? Why am I so scared of this pain? Is it as intense as I believe it to be, or is this more of an emotional tie that I've like named it and given an identity to it? And just that simple starting point of examining the pain, which would be very close to the pain generator, is just a way to start. It's like if someone is trying to create a new habit and it's just very scary for them because it's like, oh, what is all this that I'm going to have to learn? How am I going to implement it? It's just like opening the book and reading the first page. And it's just like, okay, maybe this is doable. So that's just like a super, super simple thing that I will start people with just touching the area and let's just see how it responds. Usually
Yeah.
from there, I'll go into education. Like I find that if you start with the physical movements in the body, that's very objective. So sometimes if you just talk about the nervous system and talk about the theory of how it could be impacting you, that's not as rooted in reality for some people as I used to do this and now I do this. And so if you can start them with just some physical movement while teaching them strategies to calm the nervous system. So there's different ways where your nervous system would fight back against you during movement because
Mm-hmm.
it's scared. So we can use different multisensory inputs where you focus on different things. We can use physical inputs. We can use education before, and we just see if we can start getting you more movement. And just
Mm-hmm.
that root in objectively I'm moving better, that's the win to say, okay, so this can be done. There's not something horribly wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So
Momentum.
just just examining the area, starting with movement, and then usually I'll layer in nervous system education purely, no strategies, just this is how it works.
Yeah.
And then you build in like now how do you implement actual techniques to calm the nervous system, get more movement, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All this is building better relationships with our body and being in conversation with our bodies, with our pain. And,
Yeah.
if we're constantly trying to run, avoid, numb the pain, it's in my belief and what I know to be true, it's just going to get louder until
Yeah.
we get curious with it. So, I know when you're in acute distress and pain, the last thing you want to do is be like, why is my pain here? What is
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
trying to tell me?
Yeah.
Putting the finger on it, right?
Yeah.
But, it is. And, again, that's, I think, my very different philosophy, kind of this Eastern Western blend is like all symptoms are messengers. Don't shoot the messenger. Be
Yeah.
curious.
And there's nothing wrong with going for short-term relief in the beginning
It's
because
important. It's
just
actually
get
important.
just get out
Yeah.
of pain.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's actually how you calm the nervous system.
Mhm.
That is how you calm the nervous system.
Yeah.
Listen, this was excellent, man. We got into a lot of stuff here.
I love it. Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
feel like we could talk for more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we got to do this again sometime. Maybe we'll pick a different subtopic around um, the body and dysfunction, and take it a different direction.
Yeah, no, I love that. Love what you're doing. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
You too, and thanks
Yeah.
everybody. And this will be here on both of our profiles. All right, you have a good one. Okay.
Thanks everyone.
All right. Bye bye.